Yeah, good morning.
Gentlemen, Kenneth, evening. Thank you for being here. I'm sorry I have a bad case of allergies, so forgive me if I lose my good voice. Welcome to this public hearing of the Westchester Rent Guidelines. This is the second in a series of meetings and public hearings to determine the rent guidelines in Westchester County for leases commencing or being renewed between October 1st, 2019 and September 30th, 2020. Tenant representative Jean Anderson will not be able to attend due to personal matters. Public representative Evelyn Santiago is being honored tonight for 25 years of service in the White Plains Public Schools. She will try to make it here after her ceremony. But on behalf of the board, I would like to congratulate Ms. Santiago. I will now take roll. Please respond if present. Public representative Velene Acquah. Present. Public representative Lamont Badru.
Here.
Public representative Eliot. Honors representative Eliot Cherson.
Here.
Public representative Kenneth
Here.
Tenant representative Tamara. Stewart.
Present.
And public representative Elsa Rubin, present. Let the record show that we have quorum. I also would like to recognize our council, the councils to this board, Chuck Lesnick and Peter Stecker. And I would like to thank our court reporter, Karen Schusno. Did I say it right?
She's going to type it right now.
And special thanks to Barbara Henson for the Building and Realty Institute, who takes the time and effort to record and videotape these sessions and to post them on YouTube. This is very helpful for everybody who cannot attend here. So thank you, Barbara, for this service, and we missed you last meeting.
You're welcome.
Patrick. So for the record, if anybody wants to get the videotape, if they're not here or want to tell people, it's the Westchester Builders Institute web page, and then there's a link to YouTube where they're sitting, and we understand that by midday tomorrow we'll be able to see this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. At this point, I would like to ask our council, Chuck Lesnick, to have, if he has any announcements, to make them now.
No, I just want to thank Acquah and Eddie McBarnes for coming to the memorial for Jane Morgan's on Sunday, and actually Michael Rosenblatt was there as well, and a full house of hundreds. Eddie is here now, let the record show that she has arrived. And secondly, there's still no agreement in Albany on rent regulations, but there's hope and optimism that by June 15th there will be an extension and enhancement to rent regulations.
In our last meeting, we announced that Chuck Lesnick is retiring, and he's leaving at the end of this month. So thank you for your service. And do you have an announcement about your farewell party?
So after the meeting next Monday, which will be in Yonkers at the library, which will be first a public hearing, and then there'll be the presentation by both the owners and the landlords on their initial presentation. The vote will be the following day in New Rochelle, but after the activities in Yonkers, we're going to recess to 63 Hudson, what's it called? Hudson Park. It's actually 63 Wells Avenue. It's called Hudson Park. It's a 24-story building. There's a rooftop lounge and wine and cheese and beer and pizza for anybody who wants to come. It's not a fundraiser, it's free.
How much?
Great, thank you.
That's the best part. Anything else? That's it?
That's it. Other than that, we're going to conclude the following day in New Rochelle.
Yes, I'm going to. So the next public meeting will be this Wednesday, June 12th at 7 p.m. at 75 South Broadway. And this is for the board to hear the tabulations and all the data and just ask questions. This is a public meeting. The public is invited to come if they want to, but they cannot participate. It's only for the board. The next public hearing, as Chuck said, is on Monday, June 17th at the Yonkers Library. It will be a very hectic evening because we're going to have the presentations of the tenants and the owners members. First, we're going to have a public meeting. Then the presentation of the owners and the tenant members. And then we're going to go to the party. You know, that's the icing on the cake. And then the last meeting will be on June 18th at the New Rochelle City Hall. And this will be for the rebuttal presentations of the positions of the tenants and the owners. And there will be a discussion, and then we will take a break, and then we will convene to vote to set the rent guidelines for 1 year commencing on October 1st, 2019. I have a list here of the persons who want to speak. I will try to mix it up with the owners and tenants, although I see mostly owners. Okay, I'll do my best.
If additional people want to sign in that haven't, please do so.
Before I start this hearing, I would like to go through the rules, which most of you already know, but I have to tell you. If you wish to address the board, please sign your name. There's an extra page over there. Individuals get 3 minutes, and persons representing any organizations get 5 minutes. When you hear the alarm, Peter is going to be taking the time. When you hear the alarm, please finish your sentence. You may finish your sentence, but try to conclude your presentation right away. If you have materials to support your presentation, please give them to Peter and he will distribute it to all the board members. When you finish your presentation, please stay by the microphone because the board might want to ask you questions or make comments. And also, your comments should be addressed to the board members, to the entire board, not just one member, and not to the public, not to the rest of the attendees. And last but not least, please silence your phones. Take them out now and silence them. I'll do that now myself. And thank you for being here. Thank you for being here because your presentations are very helpful to the deliberations of this board. With that said, I'm going to call the first person in the list. Okay. Alana Cipelletti.
Thank you. You got it. You got it right. Good evening. My name is Alana Cipelletti. I'm a real estate broker, insurance broker, and co-chair of the Apartment Owners Advisory Council. In addition, I also manage several ETPA-regulated apartment buildings that my dad built. As the co-chair of the Apartment Owners Advisory Council, I would like to clear up a common misconception regarding our group. Specifically, that our membership is composed of large owners and managers. That is not true. Most of our members are smaller landlords of buildings with 35 units or less, who are constantly struggling with the day-to-day management of their buildings. We are the mom and pops of the industry. Since we're always operating on a tight budget, often we are our own bookkeepers, rental agents, secretaries, and we perform basic upkeep on our properties. Whatever job that needs to be done to maintain the daily upkeep of our properties, we do ourselves. Since in most cases we cannot afford to hire outside managing agents, as there's simply not enough money in the budget. The members of the AOAC are the type of landlord this industry needs, not the type of absentee landlord that unfortunately most tenants who testify at these hearings have. We care about our tenants. We are hands-on. We do not have buildings that are riddled with violations and problems. We are also the landlords who take a direct hit when this board passes low rent guidelines. We are constantly struggling to make ends meet with making sure our tenants receive good service. And honestly, it's exhausting having to work under such financial pressures. Pressures that are created not by our action, but rather further exacerbated by passing of a low rent guideline. I'm running out of ways to make up the shortfall in my budgets, and I'm asking for this board's help. Please pass a guideline that is fair to the smaller landlords as well. Also tonight, I would like to once again ask this board to address the need for a low rent guideline. These artificially low rents have crippling effects on smaller landlords. Case in point, 15% of a 21-family building that my family owns houses units that are well below market. For example, Unit 1F is a 2-bedroom that currently rents for $752.17 when the market is $1,895. That's $1,142.83 below market. Also, Unit 3C, which is a 2-bedroom as well, is renting for $1,316.16. The market here is $2,200. That is $883.84 below market. Both apartments have one occupant in each. Each year we ask the question, why should those paying rents well below market subsidize those other apartments? After all, we pay market rates for gas, insurance, taxes, and overall repairs of the property. These artificially low rents have devastating effects on small landlords. Since with most smaller landlords, there's simply not enough rental units to go around. You see, when you have this type of loss, a loss which is created through no fault of your own management, the market rents simply can't subsidize those that are below market, as there's not enough units in a building. At the end of the day, numbers are black and white, and a loss is a loss. Every year that I've spoken at these hearings, I've stated that the failure to properly address low rents, coupled with very low guidelines, is forcing smaller landlords out of the industry, out of business, if you will. Unfortunately, this again seems to be the case this year. I would ask for a separate addendum to be added to the legislation to properly address the issue of low rents. Finally, I would like to address the various politicians who inevitably will speak at these hearings, the ones that always call for a little or no increase in rent guidelines. To them I say, seriously, are you kidding? I realize that there are more tenants than landlords, and more often than not, you're playing to what the crowd wants to hear. But please don't forget the smaller landlords. We are your constituents as well. Remember to listen to both sides of an argument, and don't just leave the small landlords high and dry. Why don't you help us by becoming part of the solution, not the problem? For example, help us address the ever-increasing costs, like property taxes, which we all have over years which we have heard over the years is the highest in the country. Or help us come up with ways to find much-needed affordable housing projects in Westchester, and realize it's not the smaller landlord's job to fix an ongoing affordable housing shortage. We must realize that the relationship of landlord and tenant is codependent, and low rent guidelines that have been passed year over year has a crippling effect on the smaller landlords. Please remember to pass a guideline that is both fair and balanced. I thank you for your time.
Any questions or comments by the board?
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next is Susan Storms, representing the tenants.
I'm not sure who Peter is.
Peter, I wanted to show you this.
Okay.
I'm so glad. I'm sorry I didn't prepare remarks. She's so much better prepared. But I'm glad she went right before me because I live in a small building. I think there are 12 units, so my landlord would be like the woman who just spoke. I've lived there for 40 years. A few years back, I figured out that I'd given my landlord over $600,000. I had added. I literally spent an afternoon figuring out how much I had spent over the years. I live in a building that's protected by the Emergency Tenant Protection Act. I didn't know that when I moved in. It was a lovely building. Didn't look any different. I just actually benefited from it. Over the years, I didn't move out. And what's happening in my town, in Harrison, I think, is you're busy building affordable housing, yet the people who have been living there all along are being driven out. So I'm here to say not only should you keep these rents, because these were really put in place to keep people in place, to keep people where they could afford to support their community as they grew with their community. But the enforcement is as key as passing these laws, because what I wanted to submit was water is part of the services. So part of the Emergency Tenant Protection Act is not only how much you have to pay every month, but also that your services are not degraded, that your place of living is not run down, and that the services that you thought you were entitled to when you have paid your rent all those years. And let me just say that we get charged when they decide to put in new things. So if they have a new roof, if they have capital improvement, we get charged. It's not as if the landlords have to absorb that cost. We get charged on those. And the town gives our building abatements with tax for improvements. So I have to say I'm not a professional tenant. She's a professional landlord. But I'd like to say that if you pass these guidelines, I think you need to pass stricter enforcement, because look at the water I get. And there's nobody that enforces clean water or other tactics that try to move you on out of rent-stabilized apartments.
Thank you. Thank you. Please stay there. Yes.
I have a question of Mr. Lesnick. Is Harrison a municipality that is elected to participate in ETPA? I'm not aware that they are.
I don't think they are. No.
They're not. Do you know that? You're not in. We have nothing to do with.
No, I did. When did that change?
Didn't change. Never was. Harrison is not part of the ETPA. They never adopted it. That means that we have nothing to do with your building.
Well, okay, thank you very much.
And if you have water, you should complain to the town.
Town of Harrison.
If water, if the landlord pumps the water, gets the water from the town of Harrison.
So we don't have anything to do with it.
Or you water.
Okay. Actually, wait. Harrison is in ETPA. I was responding, no, they're not Scree or Dree, but they are in ETPA. So the way ETPA works in Westchester and Rockland and Nassau is that communities can vote to join. And in Westchester, Croton has them for units 50 or more. Dobbsbury, Eastchester, Greenberg, Harrison, Hastings, Larchmont, Mamaroneck Town, Mount Vernon, New Rochelle, Tarrytown, White Plains, and Yonkers have them for 6 or more. Sleepy Hollow has it for 10 or more. Portchester 12 or more. Pleasantville 20 or more. Mount Kisco 16 or more. Irvington 20 or more. So in conclusion, Harrison is covered by ETPA. It's just not covered by Scree or Dree.
Yes.
That is something that
I understand they have to vote on locally.
the town board
I
could
do understand.
adopt. Yes.
I'm just saying that there is no mechanism in Harrison really for processing these issues.
So any ETPA building that's covered, you can make a complaint to
I understand.
ETPA.
I know,
We have
I'm
an
simply
office-
saying to you all that
Please
in this
go.
hearing, if you're going to pass these, which I think have always been, in my understanding, were very basically commensurate with inflation. People who moved in and stayed put were kind of counting on this. I was shocked. I didn't realize it wasn't a permanent nor did I realize that the town could opt out of it. That's even more frightening. But anyway, I appreciate it. I just wanted to say that my comments are, it's not only having these laws, but having some sense of enforcement, because, you know, they're sort of self-reporting.
We're not an enforcement body.
I totally understand. It's just my comments, right?
When Mr. Cherson says we're not an enforcement body, the Rent Guidelines Board is not, but HCR is. And our office is at 75 South Broadway, a few blocks from here. All the forms are online, and there are.
But I have to say, I also wanted to come and say, you know, some of your staff has been so incredibly helpful that I'm not suggesting you aren't a wonderful resource. Just saying, if you're going to pass them, the provisions that go with it, like the services, are key. It's not just how much the guidelines give, but you approve all the services as well, right?
No.
Continuing services under the guidelines.
It's just an amount.
Well, then I'm sorry to take the time.
It's
And
okay.
my photos. Oh, wait, no. Thank you.
Thank you. Carol Daswinter? Welcome, Carol.
Hi, I'm Carol Danziger. I own an 18-unit building in Mamaroneck. After the Senate hearings meeting 2 weeks ago, I spoke with a board member about my building, and we talked about one of my studio units that had a legal rent that was at $2,500, but that it would never rent for that amount. The preferential rent is $940, which is what the market will pay for a studio in a 90-year-old building. I told her that the unit, if the unit deregulated tomorrow, the main change for me would be that I wouldn't have to fill out the paperwork anymore, and then it would still rent for $940. That is my reality, which is the reality of most small building owners living with ETPA. Some of us are multi-generational owners inheriting the buildings from our parents. My building, as I said, has 18 units. In addition to the unit mentioned above, I have 5 units that have legal rents between $1,900 and $2,200, with preferential rents far lower between $900 and $1,500. These are the units in the building that have continually turned over for one reason or another, but basically the ones that turn over. Our other units have long-term tenants that have been with us anywhere between 10 and the 45 years that we've owned the building. We're good landlords and people stay. But what this means for us and for many other small building owners is that we never get that 5 to 20% vacancy bonus when somebody moves out. When we get it, we do get it on paper, but since the units rent for sometimes half of the legal rent, the increases just don't exist. Most of our other units have drastically low rents. I still have 2 units renting in the 500s, a few in the 800s and 900s. With such a small building, these low rents are hard to overcome. The only increase we can rely on is the yearly renewal lease percentage that this board chooses each year. The only increase we get. So in years when we hear people suggest 0%, it's hard to hear. Last year, my overall expenses went up 13%, due mostly to taxes, insurance, and repairs on the building. At the Senate hearing, I also heard tenants and advocates speak about people in public housing paying $2,800 a month in rent with terrible conditions and needed repairs that aren't being fixed. And that's just outrageous. And New York State actually should be ashamed. But afterwards, I couldn't help but wonder if New York State can't manage and repair these buildings with rents at $2,800 a month, how can this board expect us to do the same at $500 a month? Now, there are bad landlords, and we all know that. But in trying to go after the bad landlords that violate the trust of their tenants, you seriously damage or destroy the good landlords. Remember, some of us are second or third generation owners. A good deal of us have smaller buildings. We care about our tenants and understand the responsibility we have when we house others. You need to understand that we are still business owners, and it'd be really nice to make a decent living on our properties, but at this point, most of us just want to keep our buildings and our legacy going. In conclusion, a fair and reasonable yearly rent renewal increase is critical to the small business owner. Please consider us when you deliberate. We deserve the same consideration that our tenants do. Thank you.
Questions or comments by the board?
I only have the reading, I'm sorry, I printed them at home.
No?
Thank you.
Thank you. Chris DeVille. Is he here?
Hi, how are you? I have some things from Peter. I think I have a copy for everybody. Yeah. So I found out about the meeting a little late, so I don't have a speech, but we'll go through as best as I can. So I guess the theme here tonight is a small, mid-sized landlord, which is who I represent. It is becoming extremely difficult with the expenses going up, and just the increase that mimics inflation doesn't give us any extra meat on the bone. Real estate taxes, health insurance, and property insurance are going up dramatically. In the last 2 years, I personally, in our group, we saw insurance go up 10 to 12%. This year I had on page 1, our insurance plan went up 4%. That's just on health insurance. So if you have a crew of 15 to 20 men working for you, it's in the tens of thousands of dollars just an increase alone. We too have many tenants that are way below market rent. And I brought over my ticket from the parking lot. Kind of just to give you an example, it cost me $2 to get 2 hours worth of time. And on a $700 apartment, a 3% increase is $21. So it's just a little bit more than it's less than $1 a day. So just to show you how expensive things are when you have to pay $2 for 2 hours of the parking meter, you can't even get $2 or $3 a day for a rent increase. A couple of things I'd like to discuss with you, and I don't know if this is the proper venue, but we have to fill out property surveys every year. And quite honestly, I don't understand the need for one. We spend millions and millions of dollars on taxpayer money for all kinds of statistics, and to have this burden right after tax season, it just drives me crazy that we have to do this every year. And it's a lot of it's repetitive. You guys want to know our mortgages, the mortgage rates, which I don't understand why you need to know that information. I think their expense should be justifiable. But again, the state spends tens of millions of dollars on all sorts of statistics. Why do you have to burden the landlord to do these things every year? It's just besides me. And it just seems that there's more and more regulation every year. It's more and more and more. And we just don't have the staff for it. There's just not enough, and I say this in all due respect, meat on the bone to hire more people to get all this regulation stuff done. Also, as a landlord, it's becoming harder and harder when we have tenants that don't pay their rent on time. The legal expenses are exorbitant. The judges are very legal today. And quite honestly, it's coming to the point that it's cheaper to keep the apartments empty than to rent it to somebody who's not understanding. Let's see what else I have here. Another item I wanted to bring up, I believe, and somebody might know the number better than I do, I believe the number to deregulate the apartments right now is at 2754. Does anybody know that number?
Approximately.
Approximately. Okay, so in my packet, I went on today to apartments.com and I printed out all the new apartment buildings that are in Westchester County in the major municipalities. Mount Vernon, White Plains, Yonkers, Elmsford, and I think I got one other one, New Rochelle. The average one bedroom is $2,500 a month. And meanwhile, it's around $2,754 to deregulate an apartment. I don't know anybody in their right mind that would rent an ETPA apartment that was built before 1974 for $2,700 when you can rent a luxury apartment for $2,500. Just doesn't make sense to me. So what I'm asking is that while $2,700 might be suitable to deregulate a certain size apartment, I think the panel needs to discuss what a proper rate will be for a studio, one bedroom, and a two bedroom. Because we will never get to $2,700 for a studio for deregulation. It's just impossible. I would also mention that there should be a minimum increase for certain apartments. There are a lot of apartments, and some of the other speakers have said that are under $500, $600, $700 a month for a one-bedroom, two-bedroom, and three-bedroom. We're increasingly finding a problem with succession rights, where grandchildren or sons and daughters are taking over three-bedroom apartments for $700, $800 a month. No increases at all are allowed. I mean, it's absurd. So we need your help with that as well. So I was hoping that we'd have a minimum increase. I know we tried to do that years ago, and there was a judge who ruled it out, but I think we should have a minimum increase of $50 to $75 on a tiered basis for people who pay subpar rents. And that's about it. If anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to address them.
Any questions for the board? Yes, Ms. Stewart.
Good evening, sir.
Hi.
I happen to live in Westchester Plaza in Mount Vernon,
Okay.
and I know of at least a couple of studio apartments that have been deregulated, largely through the use of a combination of IAIs and preferential rents, and vacancy bonuses, and getting people in and out and turning it over. So I'm just offering that to you as something to consider, because I have personal experience with, I'm not saying you as a landlord do it, but there are other landlords that utilize the existing mechanisms to push rents over the threshold, even for studio apartment units.
That's understandable, but I'll say this. You would never rent an apartment in, I'm assuming that you're not in a brand new, one of the new apartments.
That was in 1971.
Okay, so for that kind of money, you can live in White Plains in a building with a pool, all kinds of amenities for, maybe $1,700 a month for a studio. So, that threshold is just, I understand it's to deregulate, but I think it needs to come down and be more realistic to the landlords. Because even if the landlord deregulates a studio for $2,700, he'll never be able to rent it, as one of the other speakers had said. Maybe in Mount Vernon, maybe you get $900 to $1,000 for a studio. Again, I don't know what it looks like, or what the parking and all those situations are like, or amenities, but I highly doubt that a studio in Mount Vernon will go for $2,700.
Mr. Finger has a question for you.
Right, good evening, Mr. Fair, how are you tonight? Thank you for your testimony. Are you able to get the rents up to get it out of ETPA if you don't have turnover in the apartments?
No, I am not. And quite honestly, for all the apartments we manage, I think I've only deregulated maybe 4 and 600 in the last 6 or 7 years. So maybe I'm doing something wrong, but there's not much you can do to deregulate. In order to deregulate them or to increase the rent, somebody has to move out, which we can't force anybody out or ask anybody to leave. Once somebody moves into that apartment, they're there until they decide to move.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Cherson.
Thank you. What number would you suggest as the floor for a minimum increase? In other words, the low rent, if it's at a certain number, there would be a minimum increase of X dollars. What would that floor be, in your opinion?
So I would think a $50 increase with a max of 10% would be fine. So
He's looking at your number.
How much would the rent need to be?
let's take, for example, if I understand you correctly, if somebody's paying $500 for a one bedroom, the max, and we say there's a $50 minimum, the max that rent can go up is $50. Or let's say it was $400, 10% would be $40. So if it was a $50 minimum, a $50 increase, the max you could go up would be $40.
Right, so would 500 and below be the number that you were suggesting for a minimum increase?
Well, I believe, again, it depends on the tier that you're in. If it's, and a studio is worth so much, and one bedroom is worth so much, two bedroom, but, so I don't know if I'm answering your question correctly, but anything under $700 is a very reasonable rent in Westchester.
That's the answer. There you go. Thank you.
Yes, Ms. Stewart.
Do you have any tenants on fixed incomes in your property?
Yes, we have a lot of tenants that are senior citizens, and we instruct them to go to their local towns and cities to get onto the SCREE program.
What's the SCREE income limit for your area?
I don't know that on the top of my head, I'm sorry, but I know that the cities, you could go to I believe it's the Office of the Aging, and they will, I think they look at that individual's income, and then they'll give a certain amount based on their income, but I don't know those numbers.
But I was just asking because in different communities, they adopt different guidelines as far as the maximum income for a SCREE injury. Do you happen to know what it is in your?
No, we do not, I apologize.
Okay.
What community?
We are all over, we're in Melbourne, Yonkers, White Plains, Eastchester.
Okay. So, to the best of my knowledge, Vernon and Yonkers are both $50,000 for the SCREE limit. I do not believe Eastchester has SCREE injury. They could, but they don't. And White Plains is raising it from $30,000 to $50,000. I think they did it last week. So that will be at $50,000. So you have to pay, if you pay more than a third of your income for rent and be making less than that maximum income limit. That's the statewide cap is $50,000. New York City is $50,000.
Did you have another question?
No, I was just wondering because oftentimes, in my experience, the people who have really low rents are often seniors who have been in place for a long period of time, and they're often on fixed incomes. And so the kind of increase that you're talking about, $50 or 10%, could be a very difficult burden for them to meet.
I understand that.
Thank you.
We have to be
Anybody
one of
else?
the-
I'm sorry.
We have to be one of the better landlords. We take care of our tenants. We appreciate them. So. Any more
Thank you,
questions?
sir.
Anybody else?
Thank you.
Thank you. Lisa De Rosa, representing owners.
Good evening. My name is Lisa De Rosa, and my father has built and we continue to own and operate 400 rental units in White Plains. As with many rent-stabilized buildings in Westchester, our properties were constructed between 1964 and 1973. And as with anything over 50 years in age, they have aches and pains and the wrinkles are starting to show. I can stand here and talk about the need for new boilers and roofs, but then your response would be a near impossible MCI. So instead, I would like to discuss the large and often untimely repairs that do not fall into the category of MCIs or IEIs. Last year, our main water line leading to a building with 250 units began leaking for the third time in 6 years. The first time, I dug up a portion of the street and made an isolated repair. The second time, I again dug up a portion of the street and made a repair. At the third instance, it became obvious that the water line was deteriorating and it was time to fix it. My property sits across from the city water main, and I was responsible from the main to my property. So we filed 3 permits and replaced the rotting pipe at a cost of over $170,000, of which insurance only covered $20,000. Last year, we had to repair the structural beams and the parking deck is supported in 2 of our garages at a cost of over $1.7 million. These 2 projects would not qualify for an MCI increase because not every beam needed to be replaced, and you can only file an MCI if you do 100% of the work. Even if I was absolutely guaranteed to receive an MCI, I don't have the emotional fortitude to throw money away in unnecessary repair. My father was born during the Depression, and that is not how I was raised. I was very young when my father built these properties, and I don't remember witnessing this, but I can recall my father telling me how he thought one building would finish him off. His estimated excavating costs quadrupled, and the price of steel skyrocketed. At the time, the price of oil and gas were both at 6 cents. He chose oil, and I don't think I have to remind everyone what happened to the price of oil in the 70s. He said he came home every day and poured himself a very large drink. After about 2 weeks, he said, well, I can't repeat exactly what he said because it wouldn't be very ladylike, but he basically said that this building would not defeat him and he went on to complete it. It was probably his proudest achievement. As a landlord, I'm not looking to raise anyone's rent exorbitantly or throw little ladies onto the street. I'm asking for a fair and reasonable increase to allow me to continue to run my properties. Do not tell that man's daughter that she cannot continue what he fought so hard to accomplish.
Thank you. Any questions by the board? Thank you.
Thank you.
I can't read this last name, Joe Marion?
Joey Barrett?
Yes.
Thank you tonight for having this meeting.
Can you spell your last name?
B for boy, E for Eric, R for Robert, A for Ada.
Joe.
All right, 2018, I had an apartment at 285 Portland Avenue. I had a sublease. I did not know if you had a sublease, you don't have no rights. The toilet was flushing up the stairs, it was flushing my toilet. I could not sleep. So I went to the building department, they refused to fix the faulty toilet. I found out that as I put complaint in with Mr. Rodriguez, very helpful young lady, and she's entitled to a higher position if you have one. She's there for you every time you call her. She answers the phone, leave a message, she calls right back. I got rejected for putting my complaint in, saying a subleasee does not have no rights to get a 2-year lease because you're not the tenant. I was the tenant. I lived in here since 2007. And he wouldn't sign a lease to give me a lease because said the rent stipulation said that I didn't have no rights because I was the subleasee. I am the tenant. I was living in here for 2007. I want to see if we do a special amendment to make a subleasee has the rights as a tenant. The tenant signed a lease, but they weren't living in. I was the tenant and the subleasee. I hope that you will look into this problem and solve this because you have to anyway. I got a new place, so I moved out of there. It's a 1220 apartment unit, but the owner is a slum landlord. His name is J-O-B-O Realty. He resides at 52 Robert Street, Yonkers, New York, 10705. All right, he didn't want to fix the thing. The agency sent the agent out, inspector out to check on the violation, but they made a decision already that they couldn't do nothing for me. My complaint got denied. And when I got that, I was very surprised. So I hope that this is a Luddite thing, but I hope you do a special amendment on some leases that gives someone a right as the tenant who's living in the apartment, because I was living in the apartment since 2007. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions?
I would just ask Chuck, we can't do anything that you requested. We don't have the power. Albany, yes, but here, no.
All right.
So just let you know.
So all the rent regulations are on the table because they technically expire on June 15th.
So I can't do amendment?
Well, right now there are 9 bills in Albany that are discussing that will amend the rent regulations that we assume will be extended. So certainly talk to your state senator, talk to your assembly people.
Ms. Sherman, Mayor knows about it.
Right.
Yes.
That's the right venue. This board just sets the rent guidelines, the dollar amounts.
All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Alan Saretsky. Did I pronounce? Alan Saretsky.
He's not here yet.
Um, Martha Rogers, representing the tenants?
No, I am not familiar with this.
Okay. And Haraj Lulu?
It's not needed.
No? Anybody else signed in there, Peter?
I spoke already. No? Yeah.
Okay, so we don't have any more presentations. So I have a motion to adjourn.
Wait.
No, second.
One more, I put my name on the list, I believe.
You did?
Silvio Solari?
They didn't get it from us.
What?
I was on the desk right there.
Is it on the next page?
Oh, Sylvia Solari.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. You've been very nice to me over the years, by the way. Thank you. My name is Silvio Solari, former landlord in Westchester County. I will no longer own a rent-stabilized building ever again. For a small landlord of 1 or 2 buildings, the regulations are just too difficult and cumbersome. My immigrant father told me a long time ago to buy properties. It is the only investment he knew. I have found out since there are better ways of investing. I am saddened that I had to sell because the meager increases never kept up with the expenses. I believe I was a good landlord. I followed my father's advice and treated tenants like family. There were times some tenants fell behind in rent. I worked with them until they overcame temporary issues. Many times I was ill and those same tenants shoveled the snow. However, I found better ways of making money. I was driven out by rent stabilization laws. When a good landlord is driven out by unjust rent guidelines, tenants weep and are fearful that a vulture landlord might take his place. A guideline is unjust when it's not based on actual reports and numbers. In Westchester County, the rent guidelines are often not based on the math or reports, but based on the rent guidelines board members favoring the interests of tenants. I can understand the tenants members fighting for tenants' interests, but the public members must be judicious and never favor one side or the other. You, the public members, have a responsibility and oath that you will look at the facts and determine a just rental increase. You, the public members, should not favor tenants nor landlords. You, the public members, must serve justice. You, the public members, have the most important responsibility. We, the people, have employed you, the public member, to stand up for what is fair. I ask all public members to take a deep look inside your soul and make a pledge that you will read the reports, and no matter what the number is revealed, you will support that number. The members of the Rent Guidelines Board are part of our precious judicial system. We have advocates for the landlords, advocates for the tenants, and then there are the public members who must stand firm, and no matter what prejudice you might have, you must stand up and say, I will seek the truth. You are the judge and jury. May God grant you the knowledge and courage to make a fair decision. Thank you.
Please stay there in case somebody has a question or comment.
Any questions or comments?
Any questions or comments by the board?
I have a question.
Yes.
You said you were a former owner of the ETPA units. I just want to know what compelled you to come speak today if you don't own any anymore.
Compassion for everyone. Compassion for the landlords, compassion for the tenants. Because what's happening, and I don't know if you're aware of this, if you read the newspapers, the Daily News, the New York Times, you see what's happening in the city. Good landlords are selling their buildings because they have to, they must. And what's replacing them is very dangerous to the tenants and to our society, actually. Because they're coming in and they're making money. Actually, I spoke to somebody on the radio. It was a real estate program, and I called up because there's 9 pieces of legislation which are going to change drastically the nature of making money in rent-stabilized buildings, because they're taking away everything except for the rent guidelines. I don't know if you're aware of that. And I spoke to the attorney, and his answer was, you know what, and I know this, he says, don't worry about it. Somebody will come in and somebody will be able to make money because they know how to make money. They'll do things. They're those. That's who's coming in. And you don't want that, and I don't want that. So help support the good landlords by providing us with, we're not asking for, I'm not asking, you as a public member, I'm not asking you to take the part of a landlord or a tenant. Look at the facts. Look at the numbers. If it's a 5% increase, then that's what it should be. Don't say it's a, well, it should be a 5% increase, therefore we'll give the landlords only 3%. That's not being fair.
Ms. Stewart, you had a question?
No, I was primarily curious as to why you seem to think that the public members have been less than fair, that they're doing anything less than considering the facts that get presented by the statisticians at the meeting.
Because there have been times where the numbers reveal what I said, it should have been like a 5% increase and it was way less, and the public members supported that. And I saw that, and I thought that was unjust. I could see a tenant advocating that. A tenant representative advocating that. I can see that. I can understand that. But not a public member. And I saw that many times over, because I've been coming to these meetings for the past maybe 15 years. And we know each other. I've seen you men very well, you speak very well, and you advocate for your tenants, and that's what you should be doing.
Well, thank you for that.
Yes.
I will say that it seems that there are different yardsticks people may use to measure what's a fair increase. And that oftentimes, my impression is that owners shy away from return on investment as the gauge versus you're looking at your increases in your costs, but it's like if your overall return on investment is still, fairly healthy, even if there's no increase in guidelines, it's in terms of the bottom line, because the same kinds of costs that affect you, they affect tenants too. The gentleman that's talking about health insurance, etc. Tenants are having to deal with those same kinds of realities. So, if your yardstick is, well, whatever your increased costs are, and you want a guideline increase in those terms, I accept that that's the yardstick you choose. But I do believe that what is often presented by the statisticians at that meeting, part of what gets calculated is return on investment, and it has been the case year after year that return has been substantial. It is not, the owners have not been losing money on their properties.
I hate to say this, but there are a lot of good landlords who have left the business. I'm one here, but you see the struggle that some of these little small landlords are making. They're not lying, they're telling you the truth. And I think the public members really need to take a look at this and be fair in your decision making. Look at the numbers and then determine what would be just. Because you need to be just. We trust you. We the people have employed you. And you're the ones who are really the judge and jury. Listen to what the tenant advocate has to say. Listen to what the landlord advocate has to say. And look at the numbers and come to a just conclusion for everyone. That's all I ask.
Mr. Solares?
Yes.
I can assure you that's not exactly what we do here.
Okay. I know you have been very just. You have been a just person. I know you for many years.
I read all my material, I do my statistics, I do spreadsheets, I consult with my colleagues, and I speak with the tenants, I speak with the landlords, with the owners, and when I make a decision, I think it's a fair one.
I think so. Over the years, you have been very fair. And I can say that. But over the years, there have been some who have not been fair. That I can say also. And you don't have to answer that. And I know you've been fair. You're very nice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I think we have somebody else who can sign, but we're going to give you the opportunity because we want to listen to everybody. Your name and last name, please.
Thank you. My name is Alex Beldotti, Beldotti, and I'm a member of the Building and Real Estate Institute. My brother and I are third generation owners. We own a series of small apartment buildings in the Austin area. This area has recently passed ETPA, and guideline boards doesn't appear to support what the true cost of owning and operating these small apartment buildings really are. Again, like I said, my brother and I are third generation. The series of very small apartment buildings, varying from 10 units to 20 units, and with like the recent pass of ETPA, we are very, very concerned that we can continue to own these properties for fear that we can't manage them at an effective level to help our tenants and support the building in a proper manner. That's what we're very concerned about, and that when guidelines are passed and there's zero increase for the first year and a very small increase for the second year after locking in the tenant to a guaranteed rate, that's something that we can't keep pace with what our costs are. That's been our experience.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Excuse me, Jeff, would you remind everybody what the minimum number of units are that are covered by Austening's guidelines?
So Austining in September voted to have rent regulations for all buildings with 6 units or more. And then in February, I believe, they changed it and they have rescinded it for tenants, for landlords of buildings 20 units or fewer. Although those landlords still have an obligation to register because their tenants were indeed covered by ETPA for that 5-month period, but going forward, the rent guidelines will not apply to buildings of 20 or fewer. And then with the buildings 20 or greater, there's a proposed opt-out, which so far hasn't been exercised by anybody, but if the landlord agrees to participate in Austening's affordable housing program, they can opt out. And again, it remains to be seen how that's tested, but that's what was passed by the board.
Again,
Actually, the landlord is bound for 11 months because there was a 6-month look back from September 5th, so that the landlord is limited in the rent increase for a period from March, I think, 5th of 2018 through February 25th of 2019, if it was under 20 units. If it's over 20 units, I think the landlord is still bound unless they opt out, which required, among other things, that there be a deed restriction filed, which in many cases might void a mortgage or put a mortgage on a building in danger, which is one reason why there's really been no action on the opt-out as of this moment, to my knowledge. It's a complicated situation, but I think the point that Mr. Valdali makes in reference to Ms. Stewart's comment, I think, is that a zero increase for 1 year, and I think it was 1% for 2 years, does not keep up with the cost of his expenses. Am I correct in saying
basically,
that?
yes.
What was the
Zero and
the
1.
look back?
Look back to 6 months, and I think it depended upon whether you had executed a lease or not. It was either 2, I think maybe 2 or 4% or something of that nature, depending upon whether you signed the lease or not. That's my recollection.
The important thing is that the landlords have to register the buildings, no matter what size, if it's 6 units or more, but that from February 26th, I believe it was, going forward, they won't be bound by ETPA.
If they opt out.
No, if they have fewer than 20 units.
Fewer than 20 units, right.
Yes.
And I will just point out that one of the arguments I think that was fairly compelling with regard to why such low guidelines were passed for Austening was that because it was just coming under ETPA, the units are already market rate. So there's no discount or, because there's no past history. There was nothing that kept landlords from charging whatever they wanted. So they're just coming into ETPA at market rate. So, but if your units are of the size that, you expressed, I wanted you to know that you had no reason to be concerned because they're not covered.
Right, well, from what Ms. Leslie said, we do have one unit that would fall under the 20 or greater. But we're concerned, as being in the industry for many years, or again, third generation, we've seen what's happened across the county in different areas as far as what path an area might go when it's hampered by increases that aren't commensurate with the true cost of living and managing properties.
Mr. Cherson.
Question, Chuck, do you know how many buildings in Austining have 20 more units?
So my recollection was that there were 63 buildings total, although one or two of them have subsequently been ruled that they weren't covered.
63 or 20 more?
No, 63 total, but I think 48 of them had 20 or fewer. But 20 or fewer. So, but of the 1,600 or so ETPA units, 1,000 would still be in those covered by 20 or more because they're the bigger buildings.
It's 1,000 units, approximately, I believe, 10 landlords.
10 buildings.
10 buildings, 8 landlords, 10 buildings, 10 landlords. It's around the area of 8 to 12.
Thank you.
With 1,000 units, just
Anybody else?
Thank you, Mr. Miller.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That concludes our session. Thank you for attending. Thank you for your input. Your direction and your presentations are always helpful to us. Thank you. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?